Tonight's episode of Colors of the Dark is brought to you by the new comic Edie. Dive into the chilling world of Edie, published by Blood Moon Comics. Edie is a spine-tingling love letter to 80s horror. Read what critics are calling a horrific blend of otherworldly terror of The Thing, the oozing horror of The Blob, and the haunting narrative of Carrie. After being transformed into a voracious blob-like creature, Edie Jones seeks revenge on the student that wronged her and the people who covered it up. Unfortunately, Edie's insatiable hunger will not stop at just consuming the guilty. Sometimes you are what you eat, and sometimes you are what eats you. Available anywhere books are available. Hello and welcome to Colors of the Dark. I'm your co-host, Rebekah McKendry, and with me is Elric Kane.
Hi. I like that gap you leave for me to say something, but that's what I'm going with. I'm going with hi. How you doing?
Hi. So we are fresh from Fantastic Fest and gearing up for a wild amount of Halloween events that we've got to do. Travels, I know you're headed out again, and I've got a list of shit to promote that I've got coming up. So yeah, it's the best time of the year.
It's the best at times, and it's also the most like, oh my God, how am I going to survive it? But it is still, I'll never not love October, even if I'm insane. I'll always love October.
You get overwhelmed pretty easy when we have like 5 events in a week, whereas I'm like, fuck yeah, we got 5 events this week.
If I have 2 things, it's okay. I'm like, oh God, how is that going to happen?
It's true, y'all. He is. Like, if it's a Tuesday and we have 2 different things on Tuesday, he like seriously like starts to melt. Whereas I'm like, we can do it, add 4 more. So yeah. It's okay. Different work styles. We've got it. And we've been doing this for 12 years. So I know what you got.
I like to make plans the night before. That's my dream. It's like, oh, the night before, let's make our schedule for the next day. You're like, let's do that 3 weeks out.
No, I need it 3 weeks in advance, or else I can't schedule 5 things on that Tuesday because I need to know them 3 weeks in advance so I can prep.
Yeah, but where's the spontaneity?
No spontaneity. I need to plan.
Right. Well, now people have a picture. You pick your warrior at home. Pick whichever one you want. That's fine, and we'll keep going.
This is every meeting that the two of us, like when we plan the schedule. It's the two of us sitting down and me going, "We should talk about December," and him going, "I don't even know what I'm doing then."
Yeah,
and
this won't exist by December. That's always my answer. It's like this won't even be a thing by then. What are you talking about?
Elric is just banking he's gonna get hit by a plane tomorrow.
Well, yeah, I took on that car. You know, I did one car accident. I'm good.
To take on the car
every 20 years. Well, we watched a bunch of stuff down there at not as much as you might think, because it is a little. It's like there's a lot going on at Fantastic Fest. Like of all the festivals that I've gone to so far, I'd say this is like the party festival. The movies are still obviously front and center, but there's a lot of stuff happening at all times. A lot of choices.
And there was a lot of people that I knew that I had not seen for a really long time, because it does kind of unite the horror journalists. So a lot of like the horror journalists I knew from New York City were there, and I hadn't seen them in 5 years. And it was there is a lot of parties, a lot of dinners and things like that. But we still got to see some decent stuff. And I requested screeners for all the stuff I didn't get to see that I really wanted to.
I didn't get to screeners yet. I've got one. I think that was
because I planned it out.
Yeah, I just wait till if I see you get an email, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll respond to that next week.
When it pops up on my letterbox, then I get the text from you like, wait, how did you watch this? I asked.
Oh yeah, there is one I really want to see, the Harvest of something. The
Strange Harvest. I'm going to talk about it tonight.
In a second, but that one I did just find it's playing at Knoxville on the day my film's playing, so I will get to watch it there. Oh, nice. So I will wait to watch it there. But let me talk about 2 real brief ones before you got there, because I got there the day before you. And so one of them I won't go long, but I was there for as discussed last episode, I was there for my friend's film, James Ashcroft's The Rules of Jenny Penn, and it ended up winning Best Director and Best Star with Jeffrey Rush, who I got to speak to. Like when I first got there, I got a 2-hour conversation about new wave Australian films, including lots of talk of Picnic at Hanging Rock and Last Wave with him. So that was like a bit of a dream come true, a very fun, very amazing person, like one of those guys who just it's story after story. So that was really fun. So really happy for him. I got to sit next to our other buddy Ant Timpson, and there's a lot of cool people, and it played really well. It's a really dark, messed up. I mean, some people I think didn't know if they could laugh or not because it's a very dark comedy. No, it's not a dark comedy. It has dark comedy. It's definitely a dark drama about two people, well, it's really three people in a retirement home, and one is basically menacing the others and having the role with his John Lithgow, and Jenny Penn is his puppet that he terrorizes them with. And so I won't say much more than that because it's not out yet, but it is going to play at festivals, so keep an eye out for it. And it did get announced while we were down there that Shudder had just bought it, so it will eventually be a Shudder film, but maybe not for a while.
And I'm going to tell you this on air, just so you can pass it to James, because I know, well, we're both going to see him this weekend. But yesterday I was on a Zoom with a bunch of film folks out of Australia, and they were talking about it and how it's getting ready to open theaters there. And the way that they were talking about it was like, it's huge. Like they're all going, and like it's a big opening in Australia.
Yeah, it's not a big movie. It's a very contained movie, but the big thing about it is Jeffrey Rush hasn't been in a movie for about 5 years because he had like issues, and there was a big thing that he sued the newspaper that was like kind of defaming him in Australia. It's stuff that didn't really make it to the news here, and so this was a big deal. Him coming back and getting back on screen, putting his foot back in. So I'm excited for people to see it because he is. They're both excellent in it, and that one is also. Like our guest film will be In Sitches. And then the other one I saw without you that I wasn't, James was a little surprised that, I mean, I went out drinking. I had dinner with them all afterwards. But then I was like, at 11:30, they're all still out. And I'm like, all right, bye. I'm going to Terrifier 3. And they all looked at me like I was totally insane. But
no, totally tracks.
I'm a cinema warrior. And this was, so I saw, obviously people know my story if they listen to this, that the first one had zero interest, never thought I'd see the second because of it, saw it, and just there's some sort of playful magic. I will say, I think the playful magic of 2 is a little missing in 3, but 3 has some other things going for it. Number one, the cold open, and that's probably like a 10-minute cold open, like it's a real sequence, is one of the best things I've seen this year. It's like a real 80s slasher film in the vein of like how the opening of Silent Night, Deadly Night is so fucking dark. And there's no humor in it at all, right? Like with the crazy guys robbing the thing, and he's like rapey, and like everything about the opening of Silent Night is just wrong. And then the movie becomes a little sillier. This is kind of similar. Like this cold open is basically the clown in a house on Christmas Eve or whatever. But what you're really drawn to is Chrissy Fox, who I know her name, but I really didn't know her ability. And she, at the start of this movie, she's only in it for the cold open, is really fucking good as this mom, and she's in bed with her husband, just talking, hearing sounds, blah, blah. I won't ruin what happens, but the first 10 minutes, the way it plays out just feels like a nasty, straight up and down slasher, and that's what I kind of miss. I don't really need the jokes and stuff. For a slasher, it's kind of fun to see things played straight, and then it becomes a full Christmas horror movie sequel to Terrifier, and I think it's a little shorter than the last one, obviously. The gore is even just as crazy. It hasn't got a sequence that keeps going and going and going the way that second one had, that one totally absurd, the woman being skinned and stuff, which is still one of the most amazing things I've seen. This has a shower scene people will be talking about forever. Like I saw some people saying, the best shower scene ever. And I'm kind of like, guys, Pieces. Come on, Pieces has got the stall. It's more the shower stall. Yeah. And I love that scene too. But this is very good. And it's got a lot of cool stuff. I think maybe it feels like the story was kind of rushed into production, so it's not all much there. But for people, I think what it's going to do is the people who like Terrifier, they're going to love this movie. I don't think it's going to move to as many people as the way 2 expanded the people who would watch a movie like this, which is great. But I'm in for all of them now because I still liked it and I still had fun. It has a very interesting side character villain, so it's like it's not just Terrifier clown in this one, and it's very connected to the lore, and I would say maybe she steals the whole movie.
I've heard that,
which is good on a performance level, but maybe not as good on like a movie that really moves, because now you've got 2 killers and you're sharing real estate and stuff. But I won't say any more than that. I'll just let people enjoy it. I know it's playing last night. It played in LA at Beyond Fest, or last night, like we're 3 nights ago, because this will be out on a Friday. But yeah, let people have fun. And I think there's no way if you like Terrifier movies, you won't like it. Zero chance. 100% you'll like it. I think others will be a little more mixed. But again, I'm glad Damien Leone, he's doing it back to back. Maybe he's going to do a 4th and then
They already have announced
Yeah.
it. They announced it the day that the third premiered at Fantastic.
Well, this one has a big. It's a complete open, like, get ready for the next one kind of ending. Unlike the last one, you could just stop there. This one was like, get ready for the next one. So yeah. So anyway, I had fun, and I was glad I went even at like 2 a.m. coming home. I was satisfied with my Terrifier event.
I don't know how you do that, because you did that the first night that I arrived as well, where we got out of a movie at like 10:30, and I was like, and I'd been on a plane all day, and I was like, I'm leaving and going to bed. I'm heading back to the Airbnb. And you were like, no, I'm going to go out and drink.
Interestingly enough, so for a person who is spontaneous, as we were just talking about, I make meticulous plans when I go to film festivals weeks in advance. I know exactly which movies I'm aiming for. For any festival I go to, I do that. I've been doing that my whole life. I take film festivals, or the one place, or things like that I take a lot of planning on. And so then I get to the point where it's like, I don't want to miss that. I want to see and plus I can always get sleep after it. Like, sleep to me is like something you can have on a normal day. I will, when I'm at these things, I just want to see the things and enjoy it.
Oh, see, if I don't go in like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, I'll start drifting off in the movie.
Oh, I didn't notice.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. There was one film,
we'll
I will not
later.
say which one, which it wasn't a bad film, but I had gotten up at 3 a.m. to catch my flight. And that was like Pacific time. And we were seeing this like 11 o'clock screening, and I still had not slept. So I was getting to like the 20-hour mark of being awake, and it hit like the third act of the movie. And I caught myself like leaning forward and leaning back and leaning forward. Then I look over, and Elric's like watching me start to nod off. And I was like, I need to go home and go to fucking bed. So yeah. But anyway, so let's get into some of the other titles that we watch, and which one that happened during will never be named, because it wasn't because of the content of the movie. It was because I've been awake.
I think you even told one of the filmmakers at one point, so I don't think it matters.
I did not.
I think you. Well,
it wasn't. I think I did. I think I was.
I know you told the producer. I remember.
I was.
But it wasn't about the movie. It's about the late night.
I was 20 hours. I was burning at that point, and yeah, that was done. But that's film festival, very standard. So I'm going to kick us off with one of my absolute favorites of the festival, which was Ick.
So fun.
This is Joseph Kahn's new one. He's the guy, he's known for music videos, Britney Spears, just like a number of like, if that music video was like nominated for VMAs and you remember it and, oh my God, Britney Spears is toxic or whatever, he probably did it. He did a lot of these like major Lady Gaga music videos and just a lot of kind of the greatest hits of the last 10 years. But once in a blue moon, Joseph Kahn directs movies, and he doesn't get to do it very much, I suspect, because for a lot of people, I guess that his films are kind of hard to swallow because they move very fast. They are very complicated. They have jokes that fly at you just split second. If you blink, you'll miss them type stuff. And his one that I fell in love with is Detention. And it definitely took me a couple of watches to catch everything that was going on. After the first watch, I couldn't even tell you the plot because it does move so fast. And then he made an action film a couple of years ago called Torque, which is about the same, just in an action sense. And it's really fucking crazy, but really fast. This may be his fastest one, but it's called Ick. And it is about a super tiny town that is really hard for people to get out of. Like they try to, go to bigger and better things, but somehow they all end up back in the town. And it has just always had this kind of plant-like vegetation, black and kind of moldy, that grows around the town. And it grows up out of the sidewalks and things like that. And it never really does anything. It's just part of the town. Like it just is there. And people call it Ick. And sometimes you have to come by and like sweep it off the sidewalks. And it's basically like thinking like moss, where I'm from in the South, like moss, even Virginia creepers. Like it will cover everything if you let it. So you just cut it back and go on with your day. But after it's been there for decades upon decades upon decades, the Ick starts changing. And that's where this one kicks off. And so, yeah, this was a lot of fun. Definitely moved fast.
And it stars Brandon Routh, who was Superman back in the day. And he's kind of perfectly cast because he's basically Superman at high school. It's just him making out with his girlfriend, doing all the jock stuff, being a football player. And then at the end of his football career, high school, she breaks up with him. He hurts himself. And suddenly now he's a loser, doesn't go anywhere. and he has to stay in this town, and then it's 20 years later, and he's that opening section's brilliant. Like, it so suits the Khan style because it's so
good.
It moves. It's the exact opposite of like how I would probably structure a movie, and that's what I really enjoyed about it. It's quite liberating to watch someone who has a style that is just so far on the other side of the spectrum and moves that fast.
That first 20 minutes probably had easily 10 different kind of pop punk songs, because the opening part is set in mid 2000s, so like 2005, 2006, and it's like, here's All American Rejects, here's Sum 41, here's and it was just pop punk song after pop punk song. Because he has contacts with all these bands, I guess he was just able to kind of get them to use. So crazy soundtrack during that opening part. It's
really fun. Like, that's the thing. He also said up front, like, he was not trying to make a hardcore horror. He tried to make this as a YA kind of thing for his teenage daughter or something, and that doesn't make it doesn't feel any lesser. I thought it still pushes the envelope in a lot of ways, but it's definitely for, if you like Blob and movies like that, which most people listening to this will, there's a lot of CGI. They have to, because there's lots of stuff going on. I found it really fun, and it was like a real nice break from other stuff I was seeing at the festival. It's really different. It is I do know if you're in LA, you would get a chance. Screamfest is going to be their opening night film, I just read, so a couple days ago. So it will be playing there. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. So I'm glad we saw. That was one we definitely wanted to go to. Another one we saw together, it might have even been that morning, that I really liked as one of my favorites of the festival, was The Spirit of Halloweentown.
Yep, that was bright and early. Yeah. That morning, I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for that one. And so that I'm going to talk about, because this was, I thought it was going to be like my dream documentary, and it still was really good. So this is Spirit of Halloweentown, and it is about the town where Halloweentown was shot. And for those of you who don't know Halloweentown, this is an amazing Disney film that came out in like 1993 or 92. I was just barely in high school at the time, but it hit. Like, even though it was a Disney movie, it was very much about this like teen girl named Marnie, hey, just like my daughter, who doesn't fit in the small town where she lives. And then she learns from a family member that, she's affiliated with this town of monsters called Halloweentown. And she has to go there. And it definitely was like, it spoke to me. Like, I loved it so much, watching it every Halloween for a really long time. And just that character of Marnie. So I thought that was going to be kind of what this concept, the Spirit of Halloweentown, I thought that it was going to be going back through the town and looking at the locations of the movie. It is not. It actually had fuck all to do with the movie, outside of, hey, the movie was shot here, and then it was something completely different.
Well, it is charting the obsession of the town in the first place to put on this event that is honoring the movie. So that is the inception point of everything. Everything does come from that. But like, I had the exact opposite reaction, which is I'm sitting there going, oh God, this is going to be a documentary about a thing I've never seen. And if I have seen Halloweentown, I don't remember. I don't think I did. So I'm sitting there going, I don't want to really watch a documentary about a movie I haven't seen. And then,
thank you for coming with me, knowing that I was.
I wanted to see it because I'd actually met the documentarians, because they made a really good film called Jasper Mall a long time ago. And so I had met them at a screening me and Brian hosted, not like only a couple weeks before, and then I realized, it's the same people, and it makes sense now because very quickly this becomes a character study of various characters in the town and their relationship to Halloween or the town or certain other spooky elements as it leads up to Halloween night. And there are some really fascinating, if you're into things like American movie and character study documentaries, which are my favorites, it has a lot of rich characters.
Yeah. So the whole concept is that this town, which is St. Helens, Oregon. I might have that wrong, but it's one of the towns in St. Helens in Oregon, that because it's where Halloweentown was shot so many years ago, they still do a yearly big old celebration, and the whole town gets involved, and it's called the Spirit of Halloweentown. And they basically turn the town into an actual Halloweentown, and the whole thing takes place in the center of town, and it's huge, and all the businesses get involved. And so it stops being about the actual movie Halloweentown right up front and shifts over to following 5 or 6 characters as they are prepping for the town's big Halloweentown celebration. And so it follows them through like the creation of the idea and what they're doing for it and what's going on in their lives. And yeah, it was just a really cool character study.
Yeah, I really liked it. And it's definitely like, I think it's a perfect movie for people to kind of get in the mood of Halloween, because you see how serious it can be for people. And in a small town like this, you see all sides of it. And there's some pretty interesting characters and some paranormal researcher stuff that I think is always quite fun to see all examples. But we'll wait till that's got a release date, and maybe it does. I don't know. But I really enjoyed that one. What else? The next one
VHS Beyond.
Yes. So I won't get too much because there's 6 stories. I will say I think this is one of the stronger entries.
Thanks.
I'm not like when people are like, this is the best, because I'm always like, hey, go back and watch the first. The first is a complete fucking banger.
You're not gonna beat Daddy.
No, and then the second one has like one of the best single episodes ever. So that's hard, but I do think I think it was the smartest change up, because this is basically sci-fi inspired movies, mostly the majority about alien type stuff touching.
It felt like for people who are our age, if you remember the alien autopsy shit that they used to show on Fox in the 1990s, like the late 90s, it was like right after X-Files, real alien autopsy footage. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
So it's got that element.
And it's definitely opening that it uses a documentarian, Jay Cheel, who I was a big fan of his Cursed Film series that was on, I think, Shudder, where it just talk about like The Omen and all the stories behind it. I love those kind of things. And so he was an interesting choice to frame the stories and about a real video that might have been really sent to him in real life. Kind of interesting. Jordan Downey, who we had both been going, oh, what's he going to make after Headhunter?
Oh, yeah.
Is this like a total bang? Like probably one of the most exciting, like straight up action sci-fi movies I've seen in a while on here.
And we're going to talk later in the show about films where we have no idea what the fuck is about to happen. I had no idea what was about to happen in his.
And then we have the Long brothers, Justin and Christian, made a film that's probably the biggest outlier in it. It's definitely a little bit, I guess it would be Mad Science.
Mad Scientist.
But it's the thinnest on that. But funnily enough, for me, it was the least interesting, but I've heard from multiple people when I said that to them, it turns out a lot of people's favorite of the whole thing.
Oh my God.
People told me that, so.
We left that screening and went to the bar. And as we were standing there were a bunch of people talking about it. And everybody was like, oh my God, that one was my fave. And I was like, really?
Sometimes I guess it benefits to be the outlier but like it was more comic than the others. The showstopper being the radio silence, people in an airplane. Of all the films I've seen in a long time, that was the film I most saw and went, yeah, I couldn't do that. Couldn't make that movie.
Oh my God.
I wouldn't know how to make it.
It was all about skydiving and what if aliens attack while you're skydiving.
Yeah,
and so as soon we ran into one of the producers walking around the next day, and I was like, hey, Brad, good to see you. How did you shoot the skydiving segment? Because I was so just like, how many jumps did you take? Like, did you script and then jump and try to say your lines on camera while plummeting to the earth? Like, it felt so wildly complicated.
Yeah. And my new friend from India, but he also lives here, Virat Paul, made the first VHS segment ever shot entirely in India. And that one's dealing with it.
And with a musical number.
I don't want to ruin what it's about because it is a twist, but like there is an AI element to the sci-fi there. And that was really fun. And then Kate Siegel made the kind of totally different than the rest of the movies, like an introspective, quiet, minimal, but very, very engaging Mike Flanagan written short. This is probably coming out very soon it might even be this week or next on Shudder. So I don't want to ruin the stories, but I will say it was pretty exciting to see the different spin. And I think this is the way for VHS to continue, is to just radically, not just do another year or another, like to just take big swings at subgenres and stuff. I thought that it worked really well. So look out for that one for sure.
Excellent. So I'm going to talk about, because this was part of the festival, but I saw it outside of the festival because I prepped and asked for links. And I loved this one called Strange Harvest, Occult Murder in the Inland Empire.
Oh, that's one I was just talking about, right? That I want to see it. Okay, I'll see it next week.
Directed and written by Stuart Ortiz. And I'll stay pretty vague since you have not seen it yet. But this is the same group who had made Grave Encounters, and they did, oh gosh, I can't remember the name. They did another kind of faux documentary after that. I can't remember. I just loved Grave Encounters so much. But so this is that same style of being a faux documentary. And it is about a series of murders that took place in the Inland Empire. Not real. These are entirely fictionalized, but supposedly there was a murder that happened like 20 years ago, and then a more recent murder happens, and they realize, one of the cops or investigators at the scene suddenly goes, holy shit, this is the same guy. It has to be from this like 20 years ago. And there was like a huge gap in the killings. And then it's chasing this serial killer who is incredibly brutal, kills in all different ways. And there's always this kind of occult element to it of, how did this thing happen? And it's all like, it feels very much like a true crime doc, but about the investigators who are involved in this and kind of all their different perspectives of, you know, could this actually be some type of cult? Could it be supernatural? You know, how is this person doing this? And it's really, I really liked this. I mean, the acting, much like Grave Encounters, you know, they are using so many people in these, like, these are massive, massive casts, because there's so many different interviews that they're doing to make them work, that not all actors are created equal. But that said, the actual plot, the setup, how the information is presented, I find these to be fascinating. So like, I love these kind of fake documentaries. I think they're really fun.
I want to see this one because I saw a still from it and it got me really interested. Did you see Apartment 7A yet?
No.
Okay, I'm going to hold our discussion till it's out and you've seen it, because it's pointless me talking about it. But I do want to talk about that one. So we'll remember for probably next episodes will be out. I will say I returned and watched, I won't go into it, but I watched Monsters, the Lyle and Eric Menendez story, and I thought it was very strong, like very entertaining. Again, no clue how much reality is actually being harvested. Like, again, it'll depend on whose side of the story, and there's lots of sides of every crime, but I will say it was very effectively and very entertaining, and Javier Bardem is incredible. And it's just, if you like original storytelling, there's everyone talks about this one episode, which is basically a one shot long take for 30 minutes. And it just feels kind of exciting when you're witnessing it, realizing this is why TV can be great now, is that the rules don't apply. Like, it used to have to be 53 minutes an episode. Well, that episode's 30 and doesn't matter, still cuts to black. And so so I do recommend it for people. I didn't know that story as well as, say, Dahmer. So I didn't watch Dahmer yet, because I know the story too well. I probably will watch it now because I've seen just the level.
I saw the Dahmer one. Yeah, these ones I'm so torn on, because they get so much flack. Like, even the Dating Game movie that's coming up, that, which I've seen. I won't talk about yet because it's still a couple of weeks out. So I'll hold on that one. I will say I fucking loved it. But that said, like, these kind of fictionalized versions of serial killers, I see so many people online being like, we shouldn't do this. We're glorifying the serial killers. You know, they're profiting from this. I don't know. I won't claim to know the legal of how, you know, these stories get told or anything like that, but I find them to be fascinating. And so as a media, and I know that it's based on real life killings, but that said, I don't find it to be much different than like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre was inspired by Ed Gein and things like that. Like, it's such a weird gray area to get into. We can't talk about real life killers, but I mean, Friday the 13th was inspired by real killings.
This one, and the good thing about this one, it doesn't glorify them for sure, because they look pretty bad, but it also it goes into why did they do this. And there's a great scene where, like, and again, these aren't spoilers, but there's a great scene where Nathan Lane, who doesn't like them and wants them.
I can't believe Nathan Lane is in it.
Yeah, a lot of classy people are in it, but Nathan Lane's just like a journalist at the time, a Vanity Fair article, and he's telling everyone about the story, about how they should go down and stuff. And then everyone's like, "Oh, so you don't believe their story? You don't think they just did it for the money? You just think they did it for the money?" And he leans in, he's like, "You don't shoot your parents 20 something times, reload, and go back and shoot them some more if it was for the money, because you could fake it. You could have poisoned them. You could have hired someone." So the idea that these two people were heavily, like, grotesquely abused. Now, I don't know the truth of that. I'm commenting not knowing the reality of their story, but that is what they have said, and their stories are pretty well documented, and that's what the show's about. And if it's true, then there's a big part of me that's like, yeah, fuck them. Like, fuck the parents if this is what happened, because it's such a horrific fucking abusive story. So it's certainly not glorifying the two guys, but it's also saying to the public, hey, maybe they deserve another look at their trial, and, you know, so forth. But again, it's just entertaining is the main reason I wanted to put it. It's also good entertainment. But the one I definitely did want to bring up to you, because it's really fun, and I was surprised, to be honest, was Blink Twice, the Zoe Kravitz.
I want
Yeah, formerly Pussy Island. My friend was here, so we were like needed a late night movie to watch it, and it had just hit the streamer. And I didn't have high hopes, but I had heard good things, so I was like,
I tried to get you to go see it in the
I wasn't
theater,
really interested at that point.
I know you weren't.
I was just like, it just kind of sounded like the movie in the 50s that they're all trapped in from last year or 2 years ago, and they're all trapped in the 50s, and it just didn't work at all. Also directed by an actress, remember that one, with Florence Pugh and Chris Pine and stuff. It just did not.
I can't.
It looked great. The trailer made it look like Get Out, and then it was just doesn't work. This is the opposite. This one actually goes for the throat, the jugular of some of these concepts and nails it. It's basically, tech billionaire dude who's had some sort of issue. So the opening scene is him apologizing formally to the people out there for his actions, never says what they are. And then he's bought an island and changed his life. And this woman played by Numi Aki, who's really interesting in this. I thought she was really good. She's kind of seems a little obsessed by him, and she's just a server at his club. And she finds a way to meet him, and her buddy Ali Shawkat are flown to his island to be part of the small party that is going out there. And it's like Channing Tatum, Christian Slater, Simon Rex, Haley Joel Osment, pretty interesting cast of guys. And
that's a wild mix.
It's a really weird group of guys, and it's just people partying for a while, and then the twists start, and that's all I'll say because it was very entertaining, and I don't want to ruin it for people. It pulls it off, and I thought it was like Zoe Kravitz. I was like, hats off, she has the chops, and it's a very entertaining and very well executed film. So I won't give away any of the fun stuff.
Okay. I will have to say, I finally saw The Substance. Elric talked about it last show. Fuck, it's so good. It is so good. I won't say much about it because I think that the trailer has already said everything, if not Twitter has. But just go see it while it's in the theater. God damn, it's such a banger. And anybody who knows Elric and mine's taste knows that that's kind of our biggest intersection is really stylized, gross out what the fuckery, and that is exactly what this is. So we've already geeked out.
But also cool that if it had ended 20 minutes early, it would still be one of the best movies of the year. Like it's still, it's this classy, fun, has pulse, is sexy, has all this great stuff going for it, and then it just goes totally insane. Grotesque. And then it becomes like a unforgettable experience,
completely.
So I'm glad I was thinking in my brain, if Bekah doesn't like this, I think the show's over.
Of course
I knew you would.
Oh my God.
It didn't even cross my mind that you wouldn't, but I thought it's just a good excuse to cancel everything and free up my entire schedule. Like, Bekah didn't like that, show's over.
You just didn't want to plan November.
That's true.
That's all
Actually,
it was.
I did like having a nice little rest so I could watch noirs. I'm going to mention something to you in case you missed it, because I haven't heard anyone talk about this yet, but there's only one episode up on HBO right now, Uzumaki Spiral into Horror Show. It's called Uzumaki Spiral into Horror Show. It's the Genji Ito, but it's black and white. Mm-hmm. It was real cool. I watched it late last night. It was like 25 minutes. What was weird about it, and might be all Japanese manga type stuff. I know this isn't exactly manga, but like it moved so
the original
fast that I felt like I watched a whole season in 24 minutes, because like huge plot points would just be brushed over in the next action piece. I was like, whoa, but I loved it. And the imagery was freaking awesome. Like just all images you've seen before on graphic novels of the work, but it just, I don't know. I really love this black and white style, and I could have watched a movie like that. It is really cool. But again, the pacing is just kind of interesting because it moves super fast.
So that's true to graphic novel comic book style, which I have to say has been an adjustment for me since I started writing mostly graphic novels and comics is and this is such like a weird example. Like if I am going to shoot something where somebody is going to a different location, I show them getting up, leaving the door, and then re-entering a door at a different location. In graphic novel sense, that's just a frame jump. It's like, oh, I think I'll go to the shop. Next frame is the shop. Yeah. And so things move so much more quickly because you're looking at this very kind of set, 5 to 6 frames per page real estate. And so I haven't seen it yet, but I'm really intrigued if that's why it is. If it follows kind of the speed of the graphic novel, because the Spiral graphic novel, it's big, it's like a tome, but it's covering the entire town. Like it's such like a massive event that's happening. Have you seen the movie, the like 1999?
Uzumaki. I never actually did. Yeah, no, I totally remember it, and I can't
remember if that date's
it's
right.
2000, I think, or
2000. That's
I really meant to watch it back in the day, and then I just never did, and so now I probably will, because I remember some of the images from it looking really cool.
It's grotesque.
Yeah,
It's really cool and grotesque. Yeah.
but this was
I
worth
have
watching. Yeah,
I can't wait to see this. I have loved this story. I mean, every Junji
yeah.
Ito story I read because I find his ideas are so absurdist
Hmm.
and half the time comedic at the same time, but at the same time so chilling. Like he's got one, which is quite possibly my favorite story by him, where it's just people, there's this cave and people suddenly feel compelled to shove themselves in between the rocks of this cave, of this mountain. And they discover that there is a small, like, slit for every single person of the town that is perfectly shaped for them. And they all shove themselves back to the point that they can't get out and they die in there. And why are they suddenly compelled to do that? Like in
Hmm.
this, it's about a town that's suddenly obsessed with spirals to the point of turning themselves into spirals by any means necessary. And I just find that kind of absurdist mental cosmic state to be just so fascinating. So yes, I will watch anything. I will read anything he
Yeah,
does.
check it
But
out.
yeah.
But next week there'll probably be a couple more episodes. It's probably like a
Yeah.
limited short. There's probably only a few episodes, I imagine, altogether. But that's on
I will
HBO Max.
I will quickly discuss three things that I've been reading. I'll do two, just because we're short on time, because then I've also got some plugs. So this is YA, but fuck, this slapped. I loved this so much. I say as because my daughter uses the term slapped all the time. So it slapped. The Terrifying Tales of Vivian Vance by Josh Ulrich. I'm not even sure when this comes out. I have a feeling it's not out for a bit, but it is about a kind of detective-esque girl who wants to be a journalist, and she is investigating something on kind of I'll say the wrong side of the tracks in town, and she happens upon this monster that the people who live there know as the Flesh Taker. And it comes out and basically eats the poor. And she goes into this underground society where she discovers that the rich people in the town are really monsters who have been feeding off of this poor section of town for a really long time. And it's brutal and it's good and it's like super cosmic culty as well. So this is YA graphic novel, but I really, really dug it. The other one that I will mention, this is a novella that I read and also thought it was good, called Cold Snap by Lindy Ryan. This one is from Titan Books. But this one it's about grief, it's about loss, it's about a woman who lost her husband. So it's got like a trauma porn element, but she gets a cabin with her son. They decide to go kind of ride out the winter so that they can try to forget about dead dad. And it's like a moose-like character, a moose-like creature that they start seeing in the woods, and it gets real creepy. So it's got elements of ritual where it is like a faux car, but dealing with trauma with a faux car. So that one was really cool. So yeah. Oh, and I will also quickly mention, because this was brought up on a prior show, when you were in UK, Bria Grant and Mark Ward came on. We did our book episode, and Bria had plugged a YA horror novel called What Stalks Among Us by Sarah Hollowell from last year. I think it was like March 2023, may have been later, but it was from last year. So fucking good. I loved this one so much. It's basically Triangle in a cornfield. Where they can't get out and time keeps looping back on itself and they're in a corn maze, and it gets way more fucked up than that. But that one was really, really good. So that's what I have been reading for the last week or so. But I just got a ton more graphic novels. So that's what's coming up on the next episode.
Nice.
I got some stuff to promote real quick. You got anything else?
No,
okay.
I'll save my book for, when we have more time.
Oh, what have you been reading? No, I want to hear.
Well, I'd read a great book from the 80s called Headhunters by a guy, Michael Slade. It was actually three lawyers who worked together and wrote these. There's like 10 books based on this, but my friend had told me about this first three are kind of like a trilogy. And it's about somebody who is beheading woman, very specific victims, and putting them kind of on display for the cops to have to, in Canada, Mounties in the like early 80s, kind of like, so it's kind of like The Wire and Zodiac in terms of tone, but with a special squad put together to try to track and figure this out. And I thought it was really good. I would say for the books, well, sometimes I'll bring them up here, but go check us out on the Goodreads, because I don't actually review them, but that's where we log.
I don't review them.
But that was a really, it was about 50 pages in where I was like, oh man, it's hard to keep track of what's happening because it just keeps jumping from kind of like The Wire, from character to character and their different function without settling on what the story's about. And then it becomes super, super engaging. I really burned through the back end of it and thought it was one of the better thrillers I've read this year. So that was Headhunter, or Headhunters, I think.
Nice.
Real good.
Okay, quick plugs. This is streaming on Friday. This is Los Angeles Comic-Con weekend. So for those of you who are going to be at Los Angeles Comic-Con, I have 3 panels coming up, 2 of them being Fangoria and then 1 that I'm doing separately. Actually, I have 4 panels coming up. Take that back. Saturday morning at 11 a.m., we have a Fangoria filmmaker panel. I am moderating the panel, and it is Tyler and Matt from Radio Silence. It's Chloe Acuna with her film Watchers. E.L. KATZ, who is coming up as our guest later in the show for his film AZRAEL. And then we've also got Francis Gillespie, who did Last Stop in Yuma County, all coming on. And we're going to be digging into the ins and outs of horror filmmaking. At 4:00 that same day, we have a Fangoria panel for horror graphic novelists and horror comics. And so it's myself, it's the guys from Panic Entertainment. Shannon Eric Denton is joining us, who has done crazy stuff. Adam Schlegelman, who was with DC for a while. And Scott Snyder, who did Night of the Ghoul. He's done Batman stuff. But yeah, Night of the Ghoul I was like, holy crap, we got to get him on. So he's joining. And then on Sunday at 12 p.m., I am on a kids graphic novel panel, graphic novel and book panel with a lot of amazing people. And then at 4 p.m., I am moderating the Panic comic panel. So it's a great weekend if you happen to be at LA Comic-Con. So come say hi at some of our Fangoria and comic panels. And then I will also plug new issue of Fangoria, just now streeting. This is our number 25 is just now starting to ship out. Our fall issue is going out to subscribers now. It will be hitting newsstands too. Hey, if you turn to page 88, there's a really cool article on my love of alligator and crocodile movies.
Nice.
So that I literally wrote a love letter to alligator and crocodile movies. And the last thing that I'll plug, and I will be plugging this a couple of times during the month, when I started at USC, they let the professors host screenings there if we want to. And I'd worked with Alex Ago, who it runs our screening series. Elric and I had worked with him on a couple of prior titles. And because I'm also doing work over at Paramount, I was suddenly like, hey, can I screen a Paramount title here? And he was like, yeah, what you got? And I was like, Hellraiser 3. And he was like, yeah, sure. You want to screen it in IMAX? And I was like, okay. And so on October 30th, I am screening Hellraiser 3 at USC in IMAX. And we have a lot of the cast and crew coming because everybody was so excited that we were screening Hellraiser 3, let alone in IMAX, that once the word started getting around to a lot of the cast and crew, we had people reaching out to us asking if they could come. So it's going to be a really fun event. It is not just for USC students. It is open to everybody, just like some of the other screenings that Elric and I have hosted there. It's open to general public, anybody who wants to come. So those details will be up on the Fangoria site, and they'll be on my own socials within a couple of days. So Hellraiser 3 in IMAX. It is what you never knew that you needed, but you totally need it.
Most used possible screening. It reminds me, though I don't know if I ever said this, but when we're at Fright Fest, there's a line outside the bar everyone goes to after every screening called the Phoenix, and it's very long. And we're talking to some horror fans in front of us in line the first night, and we talked to them for a long time. And then one of them, after half an hour of just talking, one of them leaves, and the other guy's like, "Oh, did you realize that is Chatterer from Hellraiser?" And we're like, oh my God. So we were just literally hanging out with this, and he just goes to all the horror films. There's a British guy, older gentleman, and just I had no idea. And then after that, I started looking at it differently and realizing, wow, that was Chatterer. That's really cool.
That's cool.
It was really cool. So,
oh my gosh.
Good Hellraiser. Okay. Anyway, yes, very fun. Lots of cool stuff coming up. This is going to be a hell of a month. So
hell yeah. So let's have a chat with one of our friends, E.L. KATZ. Okay, y'all, we are back with a very good friend in general, but he's also a really good friend of the show, E.L. KATZ, with his new film, AZRAEL. How are you doing?
I'm really pumped to be here. This is like my favorite movie podcast. So Yeah, like this is so fun. I'm really stoked.
Oh,
He says that
oh,
about
well,
every movie
I love you
podcast.
guys. No, I love
I
you.
know you do.
I do listen to every single fucking one.
I know.
in fairness, he
I love
DMs
it.
me occasionally after the show with like things that we have discussed. So, in
I've
fairness,
been bothering you
he
guys
does
for a
listen.
while now. For you know this.
We were just like, you're not going to have that dude on until he makes a banger in Estonia. Then probably.
Then he can come on. No matter how
Yeah.
many cheap thrills he gives us, it's
Which
Estonia all the
isn't
way.
untrue because me and Bekah have quite a fascination with the movie November because we saw it like in a world premiere in Chattanooga, I think.
Chattanooga.
Way back.
At like a 10 a.m. on a Sunday, and we watched it together, and we were kind of like the only two people in the theater.
Yeah.
And it was very underattended at 10 a.m. on a Sunday to go watch Estonian black and white art cinema. Go figure.
Oh, yeah.
And but we both fell in love with it. And then suddenly it became this like, wait, is this like the only Estonian horror film? And so it became this kind of running thing with us that like, what gets shot in Estonia? So immediately we were like, oh shit, he shot a horror film in Estonia. Badass.
I think November was probably one of the reasons that, I ended up even going there. And I think, I also fell in love with that movie. And I think like you guys are two of the only other people that have ever mentioned the film to me, but it's so good.
We think so
creepy and
too.
weird.
Yeah. And it was just I couldn't tell, it was like a horror film, and then it would go into a snowman giving a 10-minute diatribe on the meaning of love, and then he would turn to water, and then it would be a discussion on the fluidity of water and what it means in the shape of our own morality. And I was
pretty great though.
And then it gets scary again. It was fun. It was really fun.
We can return to Estonia because we do want to ask you some. I'm very curious about like shooting there, and also you use some of the same people, so I'm curious to hear how that went. But we know you first from Cheap Thrills, which is still one of my favorite films of that decade. Like I just
thank you.
I never get sick of kind of beating the drum for that movie because it's just so funny and smart, and everyone's so good in it. But I love that this is like such a different movie because if you think about clever dialogue and funny humor, and then you go, okay, what happens? One of the big challenges of this movie, and we won't get into real spoilers, but is that our lead character doesn't really speak in the movie, and it's part of your lore.
Anyone.
Yeah. Well, there's some characters who, well, there's stuff that is like verbal in its way, right? So we won't spoil it, but there's communication in this movie, but it's just coming up with something different. But like that's obviously the first big challenge. So tell us a little bit about getting this from. I assume the song Simon Barrett wrote and then shared with you. What was the origins?
Well, I don't know. It's always so funny, like going back to when I first met Simon. It's like 100 years ago, but like I'll give like a very brief setup with him. But like me and Adam Wingard were living in Alabama after film school, and I was working for Fangoria magazine, and we were doing like super lo-fi, low budget stuff in Alabama. And Michael Gingold reached out and was like, hey, like they're shooting a horror movie in Alabama right now. You guys are like the only people that I know that are out in Alabama. Do you want to drive there and do a set visit? So we drove like 4 hours, went out to the middle of nowhere, and Simon was there. It was his first produced movie, Deadbirds.
Oh, yeah. Like that
and
film.
Yeah,
it's cool as hell.
Yeah.
Michael Shannon, Patrick Fugit, like it was like Steve Yedlin, Ryan Johnson's DP shot it. And it was just so cool. It was so inspiring because like when I went to film school, I remember telling the guidance counselor or whatever, I was like, I want to work in genre. And he was like, you can't. What are you talking about? That's too specialized. Like you need to be much more general. But then being on that set, it was like, here was Simon, this dude that's sort of like our age, and he's a professional horror writer. And not only that, is that like the script that he wrote is this weird, sophisticated, the tone is strange, super ambitious. It's got cosmic horror, it's got Western. And I was just like, oh my God, this guy is doing it. And, we talked about punk music, we talked about hip hop, we joked around when the special effects weren't working on set. We all really had a good time just hanging out. And afterwards, we all stayed in touch. And through the years, like Simon is somebody that really, it was an inspiration because when I first moved to LA, he showed me around. I got to learn more what it was like working within the system of the studios, trying to do rewrite work. And, our careers fluctuated over time. There's like moments you get a win, moments you don't, but like we're weird dudes. So the studio system doesn't always like have space for us. And there was one moment where we were both kind of doing not so great. We've been writing a lot of stuff. We've been trying to like get hired to write the big things. We were failing at a lot of things in terms of breaking into the system. And there was a real frustration where we're like, shit, like, I don't like what we're doing here. I'm not really enjoying this part of the process. And we're like, you know what? We need to write something that, we would like to see. Like, just challenge each other, take your hat out of the whole, the machinery of like Hollywood. Don't think about how it's going to work. Just like fucking write something that you want to watch as a horror fan, front and center. So he wrote a script called The Lamb, which was just fantastic. It was, it was like 68 pages. It just dropped you right into this world that it never even attempts to explain. There were so many scary experiential set pieces, and it was just feral. I just felt like there was something about it that felt completely unhinged and dangerous. And I didn't write jack shit. I probably got into like a bad relationship and got distracted. But Simon had this great, cool script. That was a while back. It was almost like 10 years ago. And Simon, we went around trying to get it made for a little bit. And, a lot of producers were like, this is fascinating. This is a really interesting piece of writing. But no fucking way. Like, we're not going to, if I can cuss, like, no way. We're not.
You fucking
like,
can.
Okay, great. They're like, this is not whatever is working really well right now, for this week. So he kind of put it in the shelf. And then my producer friend, Dan Kagan, who's a mutual buddy and used to work at Orion, and had tried unsuccessfully to produce a horror Pinocchio movie with me. That was going to be a follow-up to Oz's, Good Old Hansel movie, where it's like, we went to like 5 Eastern European countries, and it was like, he was just, it was a crazy thing that I don't think will ever happen again. But Dan loved that script and was like, guys, like, what if we gave a shot at taking this out and trying to get it made? And me and Simon were both like, you're nuts. Like, nobody's going to finance it. And then we actually sent it to some places. And I don't know what the heck happened, but it just somehow happened.
So it was unchanged when you sent it back out. It was still the same script, different title, or did that come later?
Well, he changed the title when we submitted it. And there was a little bit of a change in the script because, in his original draft, which I think we're going to include on the DVD. So this is not too much of a spoiler. AZRAEL doesn't really have a love interest. AZRAEL is just on the run. So there's still a revenge component, and the structure in many ways was the same. But, the one change that Simon did when we went back out, because now we're going out to like streamers and all sorts of places. And we're like, okay, like maybe they need something to somewhat relate to, which is root for her because she cares about somebody, which is,
Save the cat.
Classic. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So we put some Save the Cat in AZRAEL. And then, went out, and it was still a very insane script. Like, anybody that watches it, I don't know if that thing necessarily places it in a mainstream register, but that was like the one change.
Nice. And so it was like 10 years from when you created it to when you actually got it sold. That's wonderful.
Yeah, Simon, I give him all the credit. But it was definitely, it sat in the shelf for a very long time, which is funny because Cheap Thrills was also a script that Trent Haga had tried to go out and sell. Nobody wanted it, put it in a shelf, and then we just dug it out later. And, sometimes, old is new.
Someday I will write a book on the number of filmmakers, and even Elric and I included, who have sat on scripts for decades. And then suddenly we dust it off and it's like, oh, wait, this is great. And we're like, no one fucking wanted this 10 years ago.
But it's
like,
also you, right?
Terrible.
It's also wherever you are at.
Yeah.
You might be at a point where you weren't at 10 years ago to get something, push something through. So that's a big part of it, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to know. I don't know because I never know where I'm at in this industry. You can't ever tell.
So then my next question becomes, what does the script look like? Because if no one has dialogue formally, kind of how is the script formatted? Like, are you describing facial reactions, emotions? Are you like paraphrasing what they would be saying with their bodies? Like, I'd love to know how it reads. And because as an actor thinking, I'm not an actor, but thinking like how you're giving it to an actor, like how are they going to perceive it?
Yeah, Simon's writing, and one thing that I really respond to about it is that it has almost like a Cormac McCarthy quality where there's a real austerity where he does not hold your hand and go super in detail with a bunch of descriptions of like what actors are doing. And he doesn't do that, which is why I love it. But I think as we started going down the road of like putting the thing together and, wanting to go out to actors, he did put a little bit more hand holding, you know, and not even that much, but just so people could understand a little bit more of the intention of some of these scenes. You know, a lot of it was pretty like stark descriptions of action, which had its own, it definitely had its own aesthetic. It had its own tension. But he just writes in a way that I think is like, it doesn't always feel like a screenwriter that's like some writers, I feel like you read it and it's a sales document where it's like, look how exciting this scene's going to be. Look how crazy this is going to be. Simon's stuff doesn't do that. It's like, there's this sparseness to it, which is, you know, which I really like. So we try to retain as much of that as possible, but then have moments where it was like, okay, there's a little bit more hand holding.
I know well, most of the USC professors teach that the script is the instructions on how to shoot it. And so that's like a completely different way to write a screenplay than, you know, taking it minimalistic. Or I have read screenplays where the person is clearly aiming for artism or something that's more cerebral or like, you know, more kind of stream of conscious. And I'm always fascinated kind of by the different ways that they come about and what the end up effect is in the real.
I love that. And I think in our genre, you know, we used to have a lot more, you know, I'd say feature genre writers that were working professionally because there were more horror movies. I feel like now it seems like we get these spikes of stuff, but there was a lot of studio stuff and there was a lot of studio assignments that never got made, but there was a lot of people that had all sorts of cool styles. And I remember really studying a lot of these different scripts and just thinking about it in terms of like, how do you create a scare in a script page, you know? And it's not just like making everything capital letters and like, you know, look, it's a jump scare. It's like how you kind of pull their attention, things that you underplay and throw away. Like, I think that there's a real craft to that. And, you know, Simon has his own version of sort of ambient terror, which I think is like really cool. And, you know, you see it in his work.
I'm going to detour from your project for a sec, because this is something that I always wanted to ask and it just came up. So the last time I hung with you for like an extended amount of time, we were both on the set of Bly Manor. And that's one of those where I was thinking, how do Mike's jump scares look on the page? Like, do they read as jump scares, or is that something that comes out more in the production? Because that goes back to the kind of like how the writing takes place.
I think he designs them on the page in a really great way. I think it's like his writing is more, you know, there's like moments that are more novelistic, but I feel there's still a restraint in terms of it doesn't read like a too much of a thirst trap screenwriter trying to like.
He doesn't go super giant font.
Yeah, no, he doesn't do that. But it's like you could tell that there's a design. It's like, you know, you watch any of his shows or movies, it's like, you know, that he's creating this. There's a machinery to it that he's kind of figuring out in a really technical way. And he does create that choreography on the page. And then it's about like, you know, putting it on its feet. But I think it's a big part of his writing.
And I jumped ahead and should have explained. So E.L. was one of the producers on Bly Manor. And did you do an episode as well?
Yeah. I did the finale. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just shadowed Mike for the first couple of weeks, which was awesome.
It's great to see you.
Yeah, I know. So,
and I'm just some guy who's going to create thirst trap screenwriter on Twitter, and I'm going to offer really like edgelord like advice for screenwriters.
Giant font,
guys, big font, and then empty space. Boom! Now you got them.
Regardless,
some people like that stuff.
It can work. It can work if it's very sparse, you know.
A lot of blacklist scripts are just like all that is like the craziest thing just happened. And you're like, okay, like, I always
find some of the newer ones, which I've never done. I never thought about changing my font on title page. And within just the last couple of years, a lot of the scripts I'm receiving have like a really stylized title page. And I'm like, okay, I'm not sure. Mine's still Courier.
I like that. I there's this writer, Chris Devlin, who
we know Chris.
He's great.
Cobweb?
We hung out.
He's fantastic. His draft of Cobweb was really inspiring to me when I read that, because I was like, oh my God, it's like there's barely any text on the page, and it's just really eerie. It's like really like subtle eerie poetry, and you're just like, I want more of this stuff. I want people to be trying weird things on the page.
I wanted to ask you, I love it when the tension of somebody's strength is then positioned in the opposite of that. And so when I think of Samara Weaving, I think of her, besides being a very expressive actor, I think of her number one strength is her mouth. She is incredibly funny. Everything she's been in, from Ready or Not, you instantly like her because she's the babysitter. She's sarcastic as hell. So all these qualities she has are basically stripped, except for expressionistic kind of face, are stripped in this movie, and it's a totally different challenge. It's a very physical, almost Fury Road type challenge that she's going to endure. So tell me a little bit about casting her and how that was working together on this kind of material, because she's a very likable figure without knowing her. She's like, I'd say one of the more likable people on screen. And I think this is like a totally different vibe.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I do think that she has great comic timing, which in some ways I felt was always going to be like part of it, but in a physicality, in a really subtle way, where it's like, I never really wanted this to be a funny movie at all. And as you can tell, it doesn't really have many jokes, but like still having like a lead character that the audience could sort of put, like that could sort of act as like the audience in a way. Like I think Samara has this, like, there is a sense of humor to her inherently in terms of how she just even processes anything. And I think that like she embodies this real character that clearly feels like she grew up in that world. But there's also a level of like, what the fuck in her expressions that the audience gets to also be there with her and be like, this is crazy as shit. What the fuck is going on now? Without it feeling like it's undercutting it. And I feel like she brought that to the project, big time. Beyond that, I just think that like there's a real commitment and an intensity and a physicality that she's clearly had in the other genre movies that she's worked in. And it was a tough process, like casting it. But there were some actors that you talk to and they were, they think it would be cool, but then you'd actually you'd be like, well, you're going to be having 30 consecutive nights. It's like, it's Eastern Europe. It's like, it's the Baltics. It's not a depressing place, but like, it's still Eastern Europe. And we were going through, it's like, as we're still having, it's on the border of Russia, just when the invasion had just happened. It's going to be late fall. It's going to be grueling. This is not going to be glamorous. They're not going to have the infrastructure there to treat you like a rock star. It's not going to be so easy. And some actors were just like, this doesn't sound good to me. This doesn't sound good for my mental health. And it's like, it's not. Samara, it's like when I told her everything, I was just like breaking it down, because my whole thing was like, I'm not going to try to sell people on doing it. I'm going to sell people on not doing it.
Yeah.
Because if somebody does end up doing it, they're going to be the right teammate. And I told her all this stuff, and she was just like, yeah, fuck it. Let's get weird. I'm down. And that attitude just carried on to these really challenging things, like having to hang upside down from a tree, just getting choked by like a person in prosthetics who's like dripping blood on your head. Like just a lot of unglamorous shit, rolling around the mud, a lot of training, and just the challenge of not talking. Like that itself was a huge thing. And I think there's some actors where if they would have walked on set and on the first day we would have known we're dead, because it's not a movie that's like so intuitive in terms of how the shit works. It's like you have to kind of like, you have to actually try it. There isn't really a lot of things to point at. So, she showed up on set and she immediately was like, I have to actually embody this. I have to like, I have to think about animals. I have to like, she just was like completely finding ways to keep it physical and interesting and finding beats. And I think some people could have just like walked out there and we would have been like, we can't do this movie.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. It's too silly. It's too confusing. There's no electricity. So, she really brought it.
Were you using like minimal practicals? Like how were you getting all of that night stuff? Like it's in the woods and everything. Like, did you have full generators? I'm speaking,
we did.
Like
we had
the filming capabilities in Estonia.
Yeah, we had big giant, big Bertha lights that were, casting like nice, halos over the woods and like pretty big patches. Estonia and Latvia and Finland, we were getting like a lot of equipment because our money did go further, where it's like you watch a lot of genre movies and as soon as it gets to the woods, it just becomes like a two-dimensional, flat wall or like a green wall, and like a lot of that, it's not like an aesthetic choice. A lot of people are just challenged because they just don't have the lights to, put out there, or they're not putting the resources in that. They're putting it somewhere else. But I always knew that so much of this movie would just become boring if you couldn't see anything. And as much as I do really like darkness and mood, it was like you have to understand the playing field that AZRAEL's on. So we got to light this shit up, So that was like a big part of it.
Did you watch? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, my question is pretty serious. I was going to ask if he had to rent Beastmaster and Estonian to play for the crew.
I appreciate that.
Because there has to be some Beastmaster love in here.
Oh my God, I love Beastmaster.
Yeah.
Don Coscarelli is always going to be like a huge influence.
Yeah.
Well,
also your creatures. Those creatures who do the bone shake that I love. They were the ones that traumatized me when I was a kid, but didn't know as Beastmaster in my brain till like a decade ago. But like I feel like your creatures have a little in common there, and you've got the woods and fire, and you've got people, going for it.
That genre, Beastmaster definitely is a big one. Conquest.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Any adventure movie, it's like, for me, it's like I like that weird hazy intersection of like fantasy, adventure, and post-apocalyptic, where you're like, what era are we in? There's a wizard, but there's also like a motorbike.
Yeah.
It's like, that to me is such a joy, and that kind of stuff brought a lot of joy to me during lockdown, where I was just like so fucking bored and I couldn't go anywhere. So the idea of this like total gonzo escapism was like really great, so that was a lot of that DNA went into AZRAEL, probably.
That's cool.
Yeah. Now I was going to ask, and this is back when we were talking about Samara's prior work, did you see Picnic at Hanging Rock? Because I have been proselytizing that series to Elric for a long time. Samara's one of the leads.
I've already seen the movie.
I didn't, but I love Peter Weir.
She's not in the Peter Weir. This is a mini series that was done for Amazon probably 4 or 5 years ago. It may have even been the year before the pandemic, but she is one of the leads in it, and she is amazing. And
cool.
It's weird. It's super serious, but it's really weird at the same time, because this one, whereas the Peter Weir one kind of didn't play with anything supernatural. The girls were just here and then they're gone. And then it got a little bit into the Aboriginal stuff. The series really heavily leaned on it, and time slips and weirdness of the mountains and things like that. But she's dynamite in it. So I highly recommend.
I'll watch it. Yeah, I don't doubt it. She's going to be in a lot of stuff that I think is going to, will be pretty varied, where people will be like, oh, she doesn't just get covered in blood in genre movies. Like, I think, it's like she's super talented. So I'm excited for whatever's coming.
So how did you crew out of Estonia? Just assuming that it's not like LA where you can hit a rock and find throw a rock and find a gaffer. Like, how were the crews kind of relatively available?
There is a crew, and then you piece together, like, we worked with a production services company called Homeless Bob that did a movie that my friend Isaac Bauman, who shot Channel Zero, Dreamed Horror of Me, and just did Teacup. He had just done a movie in Estonia. It was a smaller film called Deliver Us. And, one of the things he said was, yeah, the crew is really sharp. It's like, they're really strong. Right. So we got a crew that was pieced together, a little bit of Latvian and Estonian, and then you get some Finnish people. We got like an amazing Finnish gaffer, and he'd done that Finnish action movie that had just come out, the one that also didn't have much dialogue. Do you guys know the one he was killing Nazis?
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about, but not
the guy walking along in the World War II tanks.
Yeah, the guy with the beard killing.
I'll Google that.
It was fun. That was actually a pretty fun movie.
Yeah, really good. And so we got people, like that, and there's a base. There's a lot of commercials that are shot in Finland. There was a unit of Tenet that shot, in Estonia. There's a history of filmmaking. It's like, Tarkovsky shot Stalker in the woods of Estonia, which was one of the reasons I was also interested in it, because there was all these old Soviet structures, and outside of just watching, gonzo C-list Italian films from like the 70s and 80s, like I was also watching a lot of like overly pretentious, Soviet era films during lockdown as well, and kind of having a high-low collision of like
that's where we live. Stuff. We live in that collision. That's my favorite collision. Yeah, everything else is boring. But
it is, big swings all the way.
Yeah.
So knowing that you had to cast a lot local, like, how did you communicate with your actors, or did they speak English?
They all spoke English.
Wow.
But it was like it was a really interesting mix, because one of our burnt people was from Poland. and she knew a little less English. So sometimes I'd be like trying to communicate to her, but her hearing was not great in the costume. I'm trying to speak at a walkie to somebody who can barely hear, but also can't completely understand English. So there's like a lot of interesting culture clash stuff that happens. And some Estonian actors didn't speak as much English, but a lot of them do. Like a lot of Nordic kind of countries, English is pretty commonly used. But there was just like other communication things where it was like, the big thing is like you're trying to get people to do the silent communication. And it's not like we're like a Lord of the Rings TV show, or we're like something that has this like gigantic Bible of like world building. We're kind of having to put this stuff together and prep a little bit and like get a bunch of villagers that are in the background to understand how they're supposed to like signal the alarm to each other, and like teaching people how to whistle, teaching people how to chant without words. Like there's just a lot of things that like yeah, it's like a crazy, that like the sacrifice scene was a lot of time was put into trying and failing to figure out how the heck they're going to do a bombastic ceremony, but they don't have functioning vocal cords. So there was, it's a lot of things you try.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll make this a little spoilery so people can fast forward if they don't want to know that this even exists. But there are creatures in the film, right? So
that's what I was going to.
Yeah, I want to know a little bit about the lore on the page, what they look like on the page versus how you're approaching them. Because I always think there's a practical side to when you're creating creature, as in like where does it live? What is its landscape? Why does it look the way it does? And there's like a little bit between Beastmaster and the Descent. There's the like, it feels like a cross section to me a little bit there, but I was curious where did how close to Simon's original description was it, or where did it end up?
And I'll interject with my question there, because it's kind of a follow-up to that. Is mine was on the mythology. You obviously, and this isn't a spoiler, you just don't explain a lot about kind of where they come from on the screen. And so immediately I've come up with all of my theories, which I'll hit you with after we're done taping.
Great.
I'll save that. But that said, like, did you, me too, did you have theories on set? Like, did you explain to people kind of the mythology behind them without putting it on screen?
I think you have to, because that informs like how they move around, I think like it's funny, it's like it was one of those things where on the page the thing that really stuck out to me is like Azrael's in the woods and she encounters somebody that, like how Simon sort of describes it, it's just like a figure, it's just like a man. It seems like a man, but like as you kind of discern more details, you're like, oh God, something's very wrong. So I think like I never wanted them to look like, such over the top monsters that like you would totally disconnect from any kind of like sort of pathetic, creepy humanity. It's like, and I think, the Bible, the biblical origins of them, that they sort of, are these sort of damned souls, lost souls that survived this like rapture like event, and they're pretty toasty, but they're still wandering around. It's like there's something sad about them, and it should be a little familiar but also really creepy and a little different than just a zombie, because I think zombies could become so warm and cuddly because we've spent so long with them, so many seasons of TV with them. So it's like giving them a slightly different personality in terms of how they look and how they move. But yeah, they were burnt on the page. They were always the burnt people. There was one version we were trying to do, it felt like they had this char. It was almost like Austin barbecue, where you get, the crispy stuff outside, but if you like pull the piece off, it would be, red meat underneath.
But we realized love that comparison, because Elric and I both ordered burnt ends last weekend.
I love burnt ends.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
I love burnt ends. But we realized that like visually that didn't even read at night. It just wasn't really like there wasn't enough moments to actually like make that sort of play, and you wouldn't really discern it. And it probably would have been more expensive to actually get 2 layers of costume that you're constantly like peeling off. So we worked with Dan Martin, who I really liked on his Brandon Cronenberg movies. Possessor, he did incredible work, Infinity Pool, and like the thing that I like about him is that his stuff, to me, it has the same like uncomfortable, squeamish kind of like, I don't know what the word, there would be a fancy way to describe it, but it's like he's not just informed by horror. It's like you would see, like Cronenberg has violence that kind of gives me that same feeling, or David Lynch, some De Palma. There's something that's like a little bit more artful, a little bit meaner, and a little stranger, and it doesn't feel like it's like, hey, I'm a horror movie. It's a little bit more like, ugh. So I kind of was like, he might be an interesting guy to find some quality to these things. It'll feel a little off.
He's Canadian, I assume. Different. Is he a Canadian as well?
He's British.
Oh, British. Okay.
He's British. Yeah.
So that's closer to where you were.
A lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're in the right context.
Which really helped, because we wouldn't have been able to get. There's such a limit to the amount of North American people that you can bring out. But yeah, we worked on a lot of concept art, and looked at pictures of actual burnt victims and tried to figure out how we can make it look gross without us just being like, this just feels like a person with an uncomfortable burn, and turn them into monsters too and make them still a little fun. So it was a long process, but that's the work.
Have you seen it on a big screen? I unfortunately saw it, like I told you, behind the scenes. When you go to Fantastic Fest, if you're a guest, you're like, not Fantastic in this case, Fright Fest.
Fantasia or
Fright Fest, but you're in a directors and some press people are like in a small theater with a not a bad screen, but a much smaller screen. While there's like 800 people, so yours especially, I was like, I wonder how this is playing next door, because I imagine it's just like a very much a crowd pleaser kind of ripper of a movie, but it was like harder to gauge. But have you had that experience yourself yet?
Yeah, it's really fun on a big screen.
Oh yeah,
because it's like the music and the sound design is such a huge part of it. So it's like you want that shit to really rip. I think it like on a smaller screen, it's more of like a thoughtful exercise, which to me, I've always wanted it to be bombastic. Yeah. So I think it's like, but I think people's TVs are hopefully are bigger and louder now. So hopefully people can still let it rip at home.
Yeah.
I just moved last week, and it's the very first thing that I watched on my large living room television with my freshly set up surround sound. So
cool.
It's very first, and it
awesome.
Totally works. So yeah.
Oh, great! That's awesome.
But you're about to go to Sitges, so you're gonna get another chance maybe to see it. With a rabid crowd.
And I've never been.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
So
I don't know what I'm in for, what that theater's like. So I'm pretty excited.
Oh gosh, I have always wanted to go. Yeah, I've had other films play there, and every single time I'm like, oh gosh, I need to. It's expensive to get to Spain.
Yeah.
So I'm always like, oh, I'll just hold off. I went to this number of festivals, and so it's always kind of draining. But I've always wanted to go, so I'm so glad you're getting to go.
I'm pumped. Yeah, and like it's like I missed. Me and Elric. I think we had two other festivals, like Fright Fest and Fantasia, that we both played at, and I did feel jealous, being like, man, I wish I could just like go to these things too. But I think I can afford to do this one.
That's good.
No, I've always heard it's one of the best. I heard it's one of the best experiences. So I think that's perfect. Okay, so now you are a listener of the show, and that means you also enjoy some deeper cut movies. Any random, when you've been listening all these years, is there any movie you've wanted to recommend, bring up on the show, tell people about? We didn't.
Oh my God! Why haven't they talked about blank? Yeah, we didn't prep him for this, so
I'm just wondering. This is your chance.
I got nothing.
Any other Estonian films that?
There's no way that I can stump you guys because I've listened to this show, but it's like, I think I actually remember you guys talking about Evil Dead Trap 2.
Oh yeah,
but
so good.
Yeah, to me that's a real sleeper of like a really crazy, vibey, mysterious, gross body horror slasher.
And not one. It's
surprisingly,
not. Sorry.
It's got a great Blu-ray. I was going to say it's got a surprisingly beautiful Blu-ray. So
it does. I'd say like that one's a great one, and then Baby's Blood is like an old favorite.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
One too. It's movies that you don't, and that's what I like about your stuff too. It's like it's not necessarily what you think it's going to be in the first 20 minutes. Like movies like Evil Dead Trap becomes a totally different type of movie.
Totally.
Halfway through, I was like, oh, cool. It's like a psycho. Somebody's terrorizing a journalist. And then it becomes Suspiria, and then it becomes a slasher, and then it's like,
oh, yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
There's I think that's the thing that I really like about our genre is that it's like, it should be this sort of, shape-shifty, slithery thing that you're like, I can't get a handle on this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I really, that's what I love about the international stuff. That's what I love about the indie stuff. Whenever it feels too buttoned up, it just feels like, you're just like, no, you're missing out on what's great about our genre.
Well, and dangerous. Like it doesn't always have to be dangerous like Chainsaw Massacre, but dangerous to me always meant I didn't know exactly where it was going. And as young film nerds, like when you're like 15, 16, once you start figuring out movies, you're like, oh, I already know what every movie is. And then you watch something in the, like Hellraiser, like the first time you watch something like that, and you're like, wait a minute, you're not allowed to do this shit. Like what, you know, it's like, you can't get this. You can't do that to your brother's wife on their wedding dress. Like,
oh yeah. Breaking the rules totally is like, that's a big part of it.
That is part of what I think people have been so thrown about with the substance is not just, I mean, yeah, it's hyper gory, but at no point could I have paused that movie and predicted where it would go.
The end, especially.
Just because it was constantly, you know, going in a completely different direction.
Like having Henenlotter shit happen ultimately. I'm just like, I was just, I was enthralled by that. It was such a blast.
I think that's part of what has really kind of thrown audiences with it is that there is nothing predictable. Like if I'm watching a slasher, a lot of times, most of the time, we could pause midway through and we could kind of plot out where it's going to go. But I love the movies where I have no fucking clue where it's going.
Yeah, totally. And I think it does feel like audiences now are not as interested in things that feel like genre movies made by committee. And I think like, that era feels like it's over, which is like amazing, which is crazy. Because for a long time, trying to make films in this industry, it's like you couldn't point at, you know, something like Talk to Me or Barbarian or A24 weird shit, or like you just couldn't. And now you can't really point to like basic mid horror movies that have done really well.
Wow.
Like, you got to make it like this.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're still seeing the what I'll call the comp scenario where like Smile does well, and then every single mandate for the next year is like, well, we need our Smile, and so they
won't find it,
and they won't. They're all looking for that exact demon lore.
When you think about it, like there wasn't a great, you know, next Scream ripoff. You know what I mean? They were all kind of at best just sort of like fine. There wasn't amazing Ring ripoffs. There wasn't an amazing Saw ripoffs. Anytime people have tried to do that, there wasn't an amazing Get Out ripoffs. Like they always try to hit
and that
this
was a
thing.
comp. The 2 years after Get Out, I know you probably remember as well. Every single meeting you took, it was, we're looking for our socially aware horror, like Get Out. And that was every fucking meeting you took. And then you're like,
and they didn't find any.
I got like a bonkers vampire thing. No, socially aware. And so, and there was
it's always the same, and it never results in anything that great. And it's kind of like, you know, even with like A Quiet Place, everybody's like, we want A Quiet Place. And it's like, but what you want is to have made A Quiet Place. You don't want to be the person that 5 years later made something that, you know, and listen, people have said your movie has some Quiet Place, but you don't want people to compare your shit to something that came out. It's it doesn't work as well.
And I always love it when it's like indie companies that are telling me that they want A Quiet Place, and I'm like, you want $30 million is what you want.
You're not going to do that for a $1 million movie, guys.
Yeah, you're looking at me with like we make $2 to $3 million films. We want A Quiet Place.
No, what you want to do is make something that's really noisy and specific. Yeah. It's like, I feel like a lot of the weirder, smaller genre movies that have done well, it's like they're just strange and specific, you know, and that's what's cool about you know, that's what's cool about it.
So, is it public knowledge where it's coming to in the US, or is that out there in the world?
Yeah, it's playing. Yeah, it's playing now. More people. I wish more people knew about it.
Wait, right now it's playing already. Right now.
Yeah, it's playing in theaters.
It's at the AMC in Burbank.
Sorry, I thought you meant I was talking about home release. Yeah, okay.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, it's not. Yeah. And then October 27th, it's on Shudder.
Well, then let's really push for theater if they're listening now for theaters first, because like we said, it is like a loud
theater film,
an exciting movie, and you'd like, you know, still be awesome when you get it at home. But I always think, like, same with Substance, I was like, I hope Mubi keeps this in theaters for a while, because it's not going to be the same at home.
I'm so happy I saw the Substance in theaters, and I would have enjoyed it at home. Listen, I love Shudder. That was another thing that kept me sane in the pandemic. But it's like, to get to see a bunch of crazy, violent, gory shit on a gigantic screen, and getting to see people in the audience getting like fucked up because of it, and like people having a good time next to you, it's a communal experience too. It's like, you know, you don't want to lose that.
Yeah, like Elric and I saw Stop Motion in the theater, and I know that is one that did a very short run, and you know, there for some reason our screening was sold out, but I heard that a lot of the other ones were rather underattended. But That said, there was something so amazing about watching her dig into her leg and pull out muscle, and then sitting next to people just cringing and screaming while it was going on. It's beautiful. It was absolutely.
I watched Oddity in the big screen, and it was like, it was so cool getting to see something that's singular, like in a theater, in the suburbs. You know what I mean? It's like, that's really cool. That's a great opportunity.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let us know. Say hi from Sitges once you're there.
Well, he's not leaving yet because this Saturday we got plans. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
No, I have no idea what's going on right now.
Wait for the response. This Saturday we have.
Wait, that dance didn't clear it up.
Yeah. It really didn't. No.
I will have mentioned it previously in the show, so this will be a throwback. But we've got the LA Comic-Con coming up this Saturday, and we have a phenomenal panel of a number of filmmakers, including the guys from Radio Silence. Chloe Acuna is joining us, and Evan is joining us. We've also got Francis Giuseppe, who just did Last Stop Yuma County and has the new Evil Dead movie coming, and I will be moderating an amazing panel with all of these fine people from different styles of horror, talking about kind of the industry now and the biz and how you sell a horror film. So you can catch us. That is Saturday morning at Los Angeles Comic-Con at 11 a.m. Check the app for the room number. But yeah, it'll be, I think it's the same one we were in last year when we did this. But yeah, it's going to be kick-ass.
Cool. I can't wait. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, man.
Hell yeah.
We'll have you back for a deep cuts where we do all the weirdest ones. If you ever save up some of those,
I'm down.
Like start writing down the ones you want to.
I'm gonna like be prepared next time, and I am gonna actually surprise you guys. With some stuff.
Surprise me with something weird. Yeah.
When we bring guests on, when we bring guests on Deep Cuts, we usually say just bring us 3 of like the weirdest fucked up things you've watched, and that's where we always go in with. So yeah,
Slime
it's really
City.
fun.
Have you guys seen Slime City?
I have seen Slime City.
I co-teach with the screenwriter and head actor of Slime City. Literally, he's a screenwriter teacher professor at USC, and his name's Craig, and he's lovely.
I give up.
Yeah, Slime City's pretty gross.
Awesome.
I had not watched it until I was co-teaching with him. And then one day he was like, I made a horror film, Bekah. And I'm like, whatever. Because he's so
it's very New York too, right? It's a very New York film. Yeah.
And he was like, I am the lead actor and writer.
It's very New York.
City. And
that's
then I was
awesome.
Like, no, it's total New York sleaze.
Yeah, you feel like there's Abel Ferrara somewhere, like outside, smoking a cigarette.
Yeah, when you're like, Hen and Lauder's too mainstream for you, you're like, oh, Slime City's the movie.
Slime City, that's the one.
That and Private Parts is pretty scummy too, which I like Private Parts.
Oh, anything Paul Bartel.
Paul Bartel's the man, yeah.
Is that the one with the blow-up doll?
Yeah, that's the LA version.
Okay.
I think that's the LA counter to the Hen and Lauder kind of vibe. But similar kind of vibes for sure.
But what
really is.
The one that Elric, I know you're a big fan of, where the guy rents a whole house just to have sexual fantasies.
It's right up on here. It's the Black Room, which finally got a release from Vinegar Syndrome this year. I've been beating the drum for it because it was trapped on VHS forever. It's a dude in LA who wants to be a writer, but he's actually just telling his wife that he wants a writing room, but really just wants to have affairs. So he basically puts in the paper, starts having a thing with a girl, and
he rents a house,
a room, a special room. But the people who own the house turned out to be like these weird, junky vampires. It's very realistically done, and like they're kind of like fetishistic, lots of bloodletting, and then eventually they're gonna kill the people he brings up, and he doesn't realize what they are, and it's really grimy. It feels like a movie you need to shower as soon as it ends.
Oh, that's
it's
great.
Like the LA version of New York sleaze.
Yeah,
I love that shit. Well, there was one, and then I'll go. There was one. I don't know if you recommend it or Sam Zimmerman.
Yeah,
but it was a giallo about a carpet.
The curse
carpet,
curse
yellow
of the yellow carpet. That's one of my favorites, and it probably was me because it's the only copy I've ever seen. On the bottom of it, it was like recorded off Italian television. I've never seen a DVD. I think it's House with Yellow Carpets or something like that.
I love that.
You can't really talk about it without spoiling it because it has such a massive, like,
it's incredible.
10 minutes in, it becomes a totally different movie, and you're like, whoa.
It's incredible.
It's really something,
It's a perfect chamber piece, too.
Yes. It could almost be a play. Like, you could put that on and shock people with the
100%.
content of it. It's no.
100%.
I'm glad because I don't think I've ever heard anyone report back on that one. So I wondered if people just couldn't ever
I
find
love it. No, you guys gave me some recs during the pandemic too that were pretty amazing. A lot of crime ones, but yeah.
That's good.
I will,
so you'd say you owe us is how you'd put it.
Sitting Target.
Oh, Sitting Target. Yeah, that one came from Quentin though. That was a Tarantino favorite that we all were like watching, going, "Holy shit!"
Incredible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll leave you guys to it.
Yeah. Good to see you again, man.
Guys.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show. For more fun and weirdness, you can check us out on our Patreon show, Deep Cuts. We will be back in another 2 weeks with another fun show. And we have some really good guests coming up with all of the October releases. So thank you so much. Check out our Patreon show, and we'll talk to you soon. The Colors of the Dark podcast is a Fangoria production. Producers and co-hosts are Rebekah McKendry and Elric Kane. Executive producers are Tara Ainsley and Abby Gould. Sonic branding by Michael Rodriguez. And, of course, our amazing sound engineer, Ernie Hurtado.